So good evening, everyone. I'll go ahead and get things started. I think everybody's in there now. My name is Ginny. I'm with Anderson's Bookshop. I'd like to welcome you to this Anderson's Bookshop virtual author event tonight with Liese O'Halloran Schwarz and her special guest, Cecily von Ziegesar. We are so glad to have both of you with us, and to all of you joining us. We're going to be celebrating Liese's new book, What Could Be Saved, and also getting to talk a little bit about Cecily's newest book out just a few months ago, which is called Cobble, which both, oh, she has both. I love it. Both are excellent reads. I read them both myself. I didn't have one with you. So just before we get started with our authors, I would just like to say thank you for taking the time to keep your eyes on yet another screen to talk books with us tonight. For those of you who are not familiar with us, Anderson's Bookshop is an independent bookstore, which means we have been owned and run by the Anderson family for going on 6 generations now. So your support is very personal to us and appreciated by us every time we have an event or you support us in some other way. We like to take a minute to say thank you for it, because it really does make a difference to us. I work in the basement of our Naperville location, and when we have registrations for an event coming in, especially for books like these that I know are such wonderful quality books, it really just makes our day. So thank you for your support and for being with us tonight. We really do appreciate it. Normally we'd be having this event in person along with almost 400 plus other ones a year, but hopefully this virtual style will keep us all tied over until we can be together in person again, hopefully whenever that may be. We do have other virtual events on our calendar for all ages and interests. We'd love for you to check out our website to find your next event. Our website is andersonsbookshop.com. Some of the other upcoming authors we have are Jill Shalvis, Colleen Hoover, Stephanie Roble, and Serena Burdick, and have also some great conversation partners coming there as well. But tonight we're very happy to welcome to Anderson's, I believe for the first time for both of you, Liese O'Halloran Schwarz, a former emergency medicine doctor who grew up in Washington, D.C. after an early childhood overseas, which I think relates to your book. We should talk about that later. She is the author of Near Canaan, which she published while in medical school, The Possible World, which came out in 2018, and What Could Be Saved, which published this week. She currently lives in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. And our special guest this evening is Cecily von Ziegesar, is the author of the best-selling Gossip Girl book series, the basis for the notorious hit TV show, as well as the novels Cum Laude, Dark Horses, and her latest Cobble Hill, which came out in November. She lives in Brooklyn, New York with her family. Hello to you, and thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having us. This is really fun and weird.
Thank you.
Yes, well, I'm going to pop up video and let you guys chat. I'll highlight both of you for our viewers, and to anyone attending, if you have any questions for the authors as we're going, please feel free to type them in the chat and we'll get to them a little bit later.
Yeah, there we go.
Oh, there we go.
Hi.
Hi. So I'm going to actually start because this is sort of featuring you, I think, Liese. And I loved reading What Could Be Saved. Oh, it's upside down. Here we go. No, I don't know. I have to apologize to everyone watching because I'm in a hotel room and I'm not at home. I'm in Virginia because I'm dropping my daughter off at college. And so this is a sort of, you can see like a pillow, and it's a weird background for me. But anyway, I'm very excited to be here. And thank you, Andersons. Thank you, Ginny. And thank you, Liese, for writing this wonderful book. And maybe you could just tell us a little bit about What Could Be Saved to start off with.
Thank you so much, Cecily. You are such a trooper to be doing this from the road. And yes, there is my book right there. And see how shiny it is? I'm just loving this. Anyway, it's only been out for a couple of days, so I'm still pretty obsessed with it. But I mean, the way that it looks. Yes, this is a novel about an expatriate family who lives in Bangkok in 1972, whose son goes missing, 8-year-old son goes missing. And then several decades later, a man appears to Washington, D.C., or contacts the sisters who are living in Washington, D.C. now in 2019, saying that he's the vanished boy. So that's the premise of the book. And the book asks several questions, but mainly 2 right away, which is it really Philip? And whether or not it's Philip, what happened to Philip in 1972? And along with a lot of other questions along the way, which I hope it all answers all of them.
I mean, what I really thought was incredible about the book is that you you go back and forth from Bangkok in 1972 and Washington, D.C. in the present tense, but also Bangkok in the present tense. And you managed to juggle all of that while giving this. I felt like I was sort of just discovering the whole time I was reading the book. First of all, I discovered you as a writer because I wasn't familiar with your work before. And it was such a pleasure to discover you, but also just discovering Thailand too, because I don't know anything about Thailand. And you just give so many incredible details, but at the same time, there's this, in the course of reading the book, there's this mystery, right? You know, is it Philip? What happened to Philip? And I couldn't put it down. I mean, I really couldn't put it down. And then I wanted to read it again the minute I finished it, and I'm going to read it again because I feel like there are just so many things that I felt like I was reading it in a hurry because of this. I had to read it, or I wanted to read it and be done, but by tonight. But then I want to read it again and like savor it. But so why you've written other novels, and this is the first time that you've written about Thailand itself. So why this story now, I guess, and maybe how did the book come to be to begin with?
Oh, it's such a lovely long story in itself. But I'll make it brief. It started actually, I spent a little bit of my youth, my childhood in Bangkok, around basically the same time that the Preston family is there during the Vietnam War. And it was a beautiful part of my childhood. My whole family loved Bangkok. We loved living there. And I was young enough that it seemed like the norm to me, and I just really loved it. And so it's always held a really cherished place in my heart and my memory, even though we were there for a brief time and we came back so long ago. I think of Washington, D.C. as my hometown, but in some ways I also think of that era of Bangkok as sort of also a hometown. But part of the point of the book is that, expatriates really aren't at home, and no matter how much they pretend they might be or try to be. And when I started to write this book, I wrote it with a very pure sense of nostalgia. I wrote it actually as a short story back in medical school. It was the very small germ of the book. I just started writing fiction. I'd always written poetry before. And I wrote a story called The Driver. And it really was not completely factual because it was based on childhood memory, but it was about an incident that I remembered from my childhood having to do with one of our drivers. We had people to drive us around. And the book, the thing stayed a short story, but I always loved it. And I loved it for its sentimentality and its nostalgia. But then, fast forward a few decades, and I'm, I think a little older and wiser, already written another book. And I felt that there was a book in this story, but it wasn't just a sentimental nostalgia piece, because now that I'm older and wiser, yay, I actually think about the reader. And it's really about the reader, because I'm a reader first. So it's not just about how beautiful the birds sound or, how nice it makes me feel to remember these bits of my childhood. So I wanted to write a story that would be gripping to a reader, because I want to read gripping stories. And all of a sudden I realized sorry, it's my cat, what that gripping factor was. And it had never occurred to me until a couple of years ago when I started writing this draft, which eventually became What Could Be Saved. And the factor that suddenly occurred that changed everything and sort of galvanized the book into creation was the child going missing. Because to me, that seemed on its face rather interesting. The dilemma of having a small child missing in a foreign country in the 70s, which might as well be like, prehistoric times. It's so long ago and the technology is so non-existent. And then what do you do? You know, I think we're all kind of interested in these extreme circumstances that are so challenging and emotional. And so when I started with that idea, I sat down and began to write the book. And it was, for the first time, I started conceiving of a present day portion, which started out, I think, being 2018, but I changed it to 2019 because, of course, I'd finished the draft and I wanted to update it because it really didn't have to be 2018. It just couldn't be 2020 because of COVID.
Right.
So I did want to ask you about Cobble Hill. You wrote Cobble Hill. I don't mean to be sort of disjointed, but you wrote Cobble Hill you published it during the pandemic, and how much did you anticipate? I had a sense as I was revising that the pandemic was happening, and so I couldn't include it in my book. But how did you pay attention to the pandemic with Cobble Hill, or did you not include any details?
It was finished and had gone into production basically in March. So I was just getting, things back from a proofreader and copy editor, but it was done.
Wow.
So, but the one thing that I'm sort of pleased about is there is a scene at the end of the book where, it's Guy Fawkes night, bonfire night in England, and in that scene, there's a guy burning in a bonfire, and the guy looks very similar to the current president.
I noticed that.
I say the former president, and so yeah. Anyway,
no, I noticed. What I did notice is you had some current events that happened during the pandemic. I found that really interesting because it was a choice. You had to make a choice.
Yeah,
and shifting the whole book to put it in the pandemic. What a nightmare.
Yeah. No, I mean, I tend to include, current stuff in all of my books. So, and sometimes I wind up predicting something that there's no idea. I couldn't have had any idea that it would happen, but I just have to take a leap of faith. I actually, in an earlier draft of the book, I had Prince Philip, the Queen's husband, was dead. And then I decided that I couldn't predict that at all, and that wasn't right. And I'm glad that I just made that decision because he's still with us. Anyway, but so can you read a little bit from What Could Be Saved?
Sure. I have a little scene that I like because it's at the very beginning. I don't believe in spoilers. And I'll set this up. It's pretty short, but I'll set this up. It's in the present day. It's in 2019. And it's the point of view is Laura, who's the youngest sister, or the younger sister in the youngest child in the Preston family. And she's gotten this contact from a man who claims to be her brother. And she was 7 when she last saw him. And her memories are all scrambled. I mean, she's now in her 50s. And she believes it's him. Her older sister, she sees him on Skype call. Her older sister doesn't believe it's him because there have been so many scams throughout the years. This is a wealthy family. They've had a lot of false leads and wasted a lot of time. And by now, over 45 years have passed, and no one really thinks it's possible that this guy is just going to pop up. And, why would he have stayed away so long? So, however, Laura is impulsive, and there may be some things at home that she's interested in getting away from. And she feels impelled to go to Bangkok and find out. And so this is a scene that takes place on the airplane to Bangkok. There's a noise.
I know.
What happened?
What's going on? It's
okay.
My computer.
I'll just talk. It's okay.
Sorry.
It's okay. I've got a cat clawing me, so we're good. She retrieved the bag from under the seat in front of her and unzipped the outside pocket, extracted the manila envelope that she'd gotten from her mother's desk drawer. She punched on the reading light above her and put a fingertip to the inked whorl of the capital P. Genevieve's handwriting had always been beautiful. Now, I should stop here. Genevieve is the name of the mother, Robert is the name of the father, and Beatrice is the name of the sister, of the older sister. The envelope wasn't very full. Back then, childhoods were largely recorded in memory. School portraits once a year, clusters of snapshots at birthdays or on holidays. No selfies, no burst-clicked images that could be inspected on the spot and deleted, reposed and recaptured as many times as needed to achieve perfection. How blindly Laura's cohort had fumbled through their lives, pointing their cameras and hoping, the developed film coming back weeks later with so many dud images, blurry or underexposed, eyes closed or mouth open or hair blowing across a face. Philip's existence, as attested to by the contents of the envelope, amounted to a thin sheaf of paper, a couple of snapshots, an accordioned yellow vaccination card gone fuzzy at the folds, some newspaper clippings, and the records from his birth in 1963, in Pennsylvania of all places. Genevieve had told Laura that story one snowy day in the Tudor when Laura was about 12. She'd come downstairs to find her mother seated with hands in her lap, staring out the sitting room wall of windows at the blur of fast falling white. It was such a rare sight, Genevieve doing nothing, not on her way in or out of a room or the front door, not packing or unpacking or talking into a telephone while ticking items on a list. As Laura hesitated in the doorway, her mother spoke without looking over. Philip was born on a day like this, said Genevieve. Laura had gone into the room and sat down to listen to the rest. Every detail stayed with her forever after, as vivid as if she'd been there. Genevieve and Robert driving home from New England 2 weeks before Christmas. A light snowfall tumbling against the windshield. The baby who would turn out to be Philip due in a month, and toddler B asleep in the back seat. The snow thickened and Robert adjusted the wipers. He was leaning forward to scrub the fog from the inside of the glass with the side of his hand when his wife's sharp cry pierced the quiet. Genevieve's story included the cry, not its provocation. She made no mention of pain, certainly did not hint at water breaking or other nether region events. Urgency was conveyed by other details, the snow waxing into a blizzard, the windshield whiting out, the lighted letters hospital appearing in the sky above the roadway like the star above Bethlehem, and Robert fishtailing the car onto the exit ramp, following the sign until they reached the hospital beneath it, careening through undulating drifts in the empty parking lot right up to the building. Robert getting out of the car almost before it had stopped and running around to open Genevieve's side, helping her out. The two of them struggling together toward the entrance, pulling the door open to see the bored staff looking up from their cups of coffee. The narrative made a jump cut then, from nurses whisking Genevieve into a wheelchair to a soft-focused Philip tucked into a blue receiving blanket, 10 rosy toes at one end, and a puff of startled-looking white blonde hair at the other. Babies of that era appeared in a cloud of mystery, not mucus. At this point in the story, Genevieve exclaimed, "He looked just like a little Dutchman," and added with a low laugh, "At first, Robert thought they must have given us the wrong baby." Robert, not your father. Laura knew then that her mother wasn't telling the story specifically to Laura. She was merely telling it. A long silence had followed. Laura was caught in a blend of emotions, pinned by fascination, yet made uncomfortable by the intimacy that hadn't clearly been intended to include her. 1,000 questions crowded into her head. She felt too awkward to voice them before Genevieve spoke again. "Snow always makes me think of him." It was said almost apologetically. She smiled at Laura and got up, left the room with those words still in the air. Even at 12, Laura perceived the lie in them, and for the first time understood. Her mother was always thinking of him. The 2 photographs in the envelope had both been taken not long before Philip had disappeared. One was a color school portrait from that spring. He was wearing the sea green sweater with the crest, and his hair was slicked down and parted above his gapped smile, 2 front teeth peeking their triplicate points from his gums. The other photo was a black and white snapshot captured at a 4th of July picnic. Laura examined the rest of the items from the envelope. The birth certificate, embossed with the seal of Pennsylvania. A card with a yellowed sawtooth of Scotch tape along its top edge that had probably been affixed to his newborn crib. It featured a jaunty cartoon stork with a cigar in his beak, leering beside spaces for name, sex, length, and birth weight. The canary-colored vaccination record had scribbled impatient-looking initials and dates in the cells beside typhoid, yellow fever, polio. Clippings from the Bangkok Post and International Herald Tribune, wearing through the creases from having been unfolded and refolded many times. The last item was a brittle ivory onion skin sheet with a set of tiny inked footprints on it, one slightly ahead of the other, as though Philip were going somewhere on the day he was born, already disappearing and leaving tracks so they could follow.
That's so beautiful.
Thank you. Cue dramatic music.
Well, that's another thing. I mean, the mystery of Philip is one thing, but the other, the details of like the snapshots in the envelope and the papers reminds me of some of the things that Robert, the father, he has this job that we don't really know exactly what he's doing in Thailand, and his family doesn't really know either.
That's right.
And
wow.
I was sort of struck by that. Or if they do, if his wife knows, she's not really letting on that she knows, or she doesn't ask. And I wondered if you could talk a little bit about that, having grown up in DC. And
well, there won't be any spoilers.
No.
But I will say that this is a family where everyone is keeping secrets, and not in any cloak and dagger or stealthy way, but every person from the youngest child through the oldest person, the father, the servants in the house, because they have a full domestic staff, everyone is keeping secrets, and some of them are really tiny and some of them are really large. For instance, one of the large ones would be what Robert is actually doing for a living. And I don't know how much I intend things when I start to write them, but they evolve as I write them. And then the revision is really where all the heavy lifting gets done, sorting things out and making it all the way I want it to be. And one of the things I really liked about how this book came out in that sense was that really when you stand back and look at it, it's the smallest secrets that have the most effect in the end on this family. And not only the family of 5, but on a couple of the servants as well. All of their lives are affected in unexpected ways by unexpected and what should be really small secrets. So I thought that was, it evolved as I wrote it, and I thought it was pretty interesting. But yeah, I guess I like documents.
Your childhood, though, as sort of living as an expat overseas and then also in DC, it seemed, I don't know, was it from experience? Like, did you have friends who had like the sort of like father had the job that you I don't know what he does, that sort of thing?
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the great thing about Washington, DC, at least this section of Washington, DC, there's a portion of Washington, DC that's natives. There are people, my sister actually was born in Washington, DC, and she's really proud of that because she should be, because really most people that we knew there weren't born there. But the thing about Washington was almost for us, our experience was that it was a reflection, really almost a reflection or a projection or a continuation of this outsider life, this expatriate life. So there are a lot of things about living in Washington, DC. I was that do involve things like that. Because the children of politicians, the children of well-known people, and the children of people who are behind the scenes, and you don't talk about it,
Mhm.
you know? So I was also upbraided by one early reader was really quite upset that I kept saying Washington instead of DC in the book. And I get what she's saying, but this is a certain kind of family, and they're all a certain age. So, and Genevieve, the mother, prefers the word Washington to DC. She thinks DC sounds like a medical procedure.
That's funny. I don't
So
think I even noticed. Like, to me, it was Washington D.C. Just as a parent, now I'm a parent, thinking about the parenting sort of style, I guess, of like the 70s. I mean, that was like I was born in 1970, but do you think Philip, I mean, this is sort of a weird question, but like, do you think that he would have gone missing now? I mean, that was a different era, right? When the parents were having dinner parties.
I think not. I think that,
background.
I mean, I'm not a parent,
Mm-hmm.
but I mean, I certainly, almost everybody else I know is, and the parenting is a whole different story now. People are far more aware of what their children are up to. I mean, you're not as old as I am, but in my generation, man, we just ran around like crazy. We would go out in the morning, and this is in Washington. We'd go out in the morning and we would just not come home until the evening. Like it just wasn't, no one knew where we were. No one cared. And I think that was a freedom we had, sort of born of ignorance, but also I guess we just weren't aware of things yet, and that doesn't seem as menacing. Now, like remembering back, it seems completely normal. Thinking of it now, I'd be like, oh my God, those parents should be arrested. But my parents, by contrast to the parents in this book, they were careful. We had rules. We weren't allowed outside of the compound alone. Although when I turned 6, I was allowed to walk around the block. It's like, are you kidding me? In Bangkok? But it was a very different world then. Like Bangkok there was a lot more grass. It was greener. Now it looks like very kind of futuristic. Speaking of cities now, this book, Cobble Hill, I truly enjoyed this book. I thought it was so funny, laugh out loud. And the part that I thought was the funniest, I told you my favorite line, and I can't believe people weren't just tweeting at you constantly that was the funniest thing, one of the funniest things I'd ever read. And I won't spoil it for the people who have read the book.
They might have been, but I don't use Twitter, so.
They're tweeting, fruitlessly, but there's some very, very funny lines. We are funny pairing, the two of us, because my book is rather, serious, and yours is very, very funny and very entertaining. And I wondered if you would tell me a little bit. I mean, I guess it's been out since late November, and perhaps some of the people have read it, but perhaps not everybody has. So do you mind telling us the summary of the book, or do you want me to read from the flap?
Sure. No, that's all right. So Cobble Hill is about 4 families, is sort of like the brief take. 4 families in a sort of well-to-do neighborhood of Brooklyn, and the kind of way in which their lives intersect, and in the sort of unexpected way that their worlds collide. 2 of the families have teenagers, so I haven't forgotten the teenagers. Anyone's worried that I've ditched them after Gossip Girl. It's very much about this very specific place, whereas Gossip Girl is about the Upper East Side. This is very much about this kind of almost insular bubble in Brooklyn called Cobble Hill, and it's actually where I live now and have raised my children. And I sort of tell my friends and my neighbors who are like reading the book down, I think they're very nervously reading the book, like, am I in it? I wanted it to feel really familiar to them and those that know me and live there, but not uncomfortably so. But I think everyone gets a little nervous. I don't know why, that should be, but when they hear that I'm writing about, my neighborhood. But so far, so good. So far, the feedback has not been, like, how dare you? So, yeah, I think it's because I do write in this kind of very, very close third person. And it's this, I've always had people sort of say to me, like, I think I know this person, that you're writing about. And I'm like, no, it's fiction. It really is. I promise. Yeah.
Right.
But we are a funny pairing. But your book it's not funny, of course, because it's this, the boy disappears, but it's completely riveting. So, yeah. And I think also, as you said, when you were writing, I feel like it's a little bit, it's never a funny pairing to have two writers together, but Cobble Hill is very much about sort of parenthood and families, and as your book is as well, about family. So
it's true, but I also think that the thing that these two books have so much in common is everyone is keeping secrets, and your characters keep some unbelievably funny and also just unexpected secrets. And in fact, I mean, I found your book very, it's, what is it, propulsive or compelling reading, because you want to know how the heck they're going to get out of these situations they get themselves into. It almost seems like you get them to the edge of a cliff, and you're thinking, there's no way they can get out of this. So that was a lot of fun. I wonder, was it fun to write that? I mean, did you enjoy writing some of these really crazy situations?
I mean, when I'm writing, I sort of have to keep myself entertained. Otherwise, I never want to be boring or bored. So I think I sort of, I almost like get myself into these messes, getting my characters into these messes. But I think, so one of the, for those who haven't read the book, one of the characters, Mandy, is she's the mother of one of the younger children. Their son is 9, but she's pretending to have MS, and she's faking it. And she's lying to her husband in particular, so that she can just stay in bed all day.
It's terrible.
But she's one of my favorite characters, and a lot of people who've read the book tell me how much they like Mandy too, because I sort of admire her for having this sort of courage to just say, like, this is what I need to do. I don't want to do anything right now. I'm not even gonna go outside. I'm just gonna stay here. And then she started, but then on top of that, she started stealing her neighbor's food delivery boxes. And that's funny. What's so weird is that, so I live in an apartment building, and people would get these boxes of food, and they wouldn't pick them up for like days. And so just in my mind, I was like, if nobody picks that up tomorrow, that looks delicious, I'm gonna, it's something. One of these boxes, Blue Apron or Purple Carrot, they have these like beautiful names, and I don't even know what's inside, but I was like, I'm taking.
I wondered where that came from.
But then when the pandemic hit, then everybody was getting food boxes or some kind of delivery. They were all over the place. But anyway, Mandy steals them and starts making delicious meals, and she doesn't tell her husband where she's getting the food either. But I guess I like sort of showing the sort of dark underbelly of people, because it's not very interesting to read about people who don't have any flaws at all. But I sort of, in the course of kind of creating these almost what should be unlikable characters, I guess,
right,
the sort of what I hope I do is I fall in love with them, and I kind of make you love them too. I mean, that's what I want to do. I hope so.
I think that's really true. Some of these characters did some things that were just really inexcusable. but you end up liking them, and it's very clear that you, the author, it gives them room to be imperfect, gives them room to make mistakes. I thought that was really interesting, because it wasn't that, good people did good things and bad people did bad things. It was that everybody is just, trying to get by, and they're kind of doing a lot of unexpected, inexplicable things.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is another similarity between our two books, is that I think Cobble Hill is very much like a sort of adult coming of age story, and kind of that I don't really know when you become an adult, and none of my characters really behave like adults, even though they're parents. And I mean, what could be saved? They aren't behaving quite as badly, I would say, but you definitely have some moments where you're showing Laura in particular kind of making some major life choices, and kind of, yeah,
right.
There's up a little bit, I guess. Yeah.
There's a line in What Could Be Saved that is delivered by a psychologist, and he says, we're all still children. That never stops. And I think that's, a secret little message in this book, or something that's consistent throughout the book, is that, the children have their places. They're all in their 50s, and yet they still are older sister, younger brother and sister. I mean, there really is a sense of that constellation, that family relationship just persisting. And I really like that, because I mean, I have a brother and a sister, and it feels very true to me in my life,
And they've been harboring these kind of, feelings since childhood, right? And they're only kind of just coming to deal with them now.
And also, I think a lot of it got squashed because Philip disappeared. Mm-hmm. And everything changes when something like that happens. And of course, I'm making all of that up. I have to sort of imagine all of these things, and draw on emotions and things that I've seen or whatever, heard about, but I can't really know what that's like. But I imagine, I made these characters up, and they become really real to me. And so I keep saying they did this and they did this. Of course, I made them do this, but it feels like when I try to make a character do something that's not correct for them, the writing doesn't come, and I'm frustrated, and it's terrible. And only recently have I really learned that, I have to really pay attention to that. If I'm having a really hard time writing something, it doesn't belong, and I need to stop. So, or maybe that's just a cop-out.
I'm going to jump in real quick, guys. As you're talking about that thing, Lisa, I have a question from a fan that I actually also had too, which is about place, and for both of you, sort of the place as character. And Miriam asked, hearing from you both, how important the idea of home or place is to the respective stories you're telling. How does the idea of home change when you move physically? In theory, leave someone, in this case, a child. And for Cecily, how significant is Cobble Hill as a place to these characters, or is it? I think that kind of dovetails nicely with what you guys were just talking about. So,
do you want to go, Lisa? Or
sure. I'm not sure what the question was about. How important the place was to my characters. It was enormous.
Right. Yeah. And how does the idea of home change when you physically move, or, in theory, leave a child behind?
Yeah, I think exactly that. I think the journey there that when you talk about that is Genevieve, the mother of the child. Her concept of home changed. She was longing to go back to her life in Washington, D.C. She loved her life, and she didn't expect to be in Bangkok for as long as she was. And she was resentful and felt displaced and frustrated, because, men have all the power. They had all the power. She had been trained and raised to be a woman who, a good wife, a supportive wife, and she was never going to, question her husband overtly. That was just rude and nagging and beneath her. But so she wanted to go home, but then, all of that changed when it came to, is she going to leave her son? where does home exist? And it really isn't that house she thought she loved so much that she couldn't wait to get back to. It turned out really not to be that home for her. So it's a good question.
And I guess I would, so in the course of the story in Cobble Hill itself, the place is home to me, but the characters in the story are really looking for where they belong. And to one of the families, Roy and Wendy, have just come from England, and they're sort of like trying to figure out if this is where they belong. And they don't know anyone in Cobble Hill. And Mandy and Stuart have sort of moved there just because they thought it would be like a good place to raise their child and send him to the local elementary school. But they don't really, everyone is sort of searching for their place. And I think by the end of the book, because they found each other, they discover that they really have found home. And I think at this sort of like point in my life myself, I felt I was feeling that way. And that's sort of, I guess, why the sort of tone of the book is it's like funny, and I'm kind of poking fun at adulthood and the type of people that, including myself, who live in the neighborhood. But at the same time, it's a kind of a love letter to the neighborhood, because I felt like I had really found where I belonged.
Yeah, I like that part of the book. I felt I really did feel exactly what you just said, that the people were searching, and they actually, I mean, it was very well done. They found a community, basically, which I thought was lovely.
Well, and Liese, I liked what you said about Genevieve coming back to that house in Washington, but then you have Laura, who has built this home in Washington as well, right. and how that, what she was really looking for, and it's all very symbolic. I think that was a really important part of the story for me as well. And obviously, Cecily, with both of your books, both Gossip Girl as one entity, shall we say, and then Cobble Hill is that, the place matters so much. I mean, Gossip Girl couldn't have happened that in any other location, but where it was set, it mattered where that was.
Absolutely. I mean, the other side is as much a character in Gossip Girl as Serena and Blair and Nate and Dan, all of them.
Right.
And yeah, I don't think that Cobble Hill this story could have happened anywhere else either.
Right.
Actually,
right.
somebody asked me, somebody from, I don't know, it was like a journalist or something from California asked me in an interview, like, is it a real place? Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so then Moira had a question for Liese. At what age did you come to reflect back on your expat childhood experience as something extraordinary? And then have you been back to Bangkok to revisit childhood landmarks? And if so, what was that experience like?
Oh, it's such a good question. I think I didn't realize anything about my upbringing was extraordinary until medical school, because I came to I had a very sort of that feeling of the world being, the sense of globalness to my childhood. People were from all over the place, and that was normal to me. And then I came home to Washington, D.C., where I'd never lived before. And that was normal because everybody's from everywhere. All the people were just from everywhere, and there wasn't a preconception of where people should be like, or where they should be from. And then I went to Harvard, as you know, Moira, because you went there too. And people were from everywhere, and you didn't have any preconception about, what country someone was from. And then, I lived in New York and that. And then I went to medical school in Virginia. Now I love Virginia, and I love University of Virginia, and I'm very proud of my education there. Beautiful, beautiful, very dignified and old-fashioned, really excellent doctoring, and I'm very proud of it. But it was the first time I slammed up against culture shock in a major way, because everybody was, there was a significant portion of the people I met who just kept questioning everything about me. They would just say, well, that's a weird name. Or like, you know, what are you? Just like, I don't know. I mean, my mother's Catholic, my father's Jewish, nobody practices anything. I went to an Episcopalian school. No one asked me this before. Like, and especially as a medical student, you put a name tag on, and then I started hearing all kinds of like anti-Semitic stuff. So anyway, I think that was when I first started to question any of it, because all of it seemed, you know, we knew all the people we knew were from all over the place. So it really, I had this sort of really delayed sense of it. And then it was always magical in, you know, the memory of Bangkok, because it really was a lovely time in my life. And I did go back, and it's a whole different world. And it's pretty much described in the book. Laura's experience going back is very similar to some elements of what I felt, where, you know, where is all the green? Where are the little houses, the wooden houses, and where are the klongs, you know, the system of canals? A lot of them were paved over and they're gone. I mean, it's a very different city. I went to places that there's a lot of high rises. It's very futuristic. There's this incredible sky train. This is beautiful elevated train that just, it's all gorgeous. And I remembered a very low rise city. So yeah, it's like New York, you know, everything changes. Like all the landmarks we know from Manhattan are just gone. And now that everyone's moving in Brooklyn, and nobody lives in Manhattan. And like when I knew New York, you couldn't even get a taxi cab to go to Brooklyn. You had to get in the cab, close the door, and say Brooklyn. Or else if you said Brooklyn when you were outside the cab, they would just drive away. So, I mean, it's an incredible amount of change, you know, in the world. And I think writing a book with a really long arc allowed me to reflect some of that.
Can I ask a question about, or are we just taking everyone else's question?
Oh, go ahead, please.
I had a question for you, Liese, about the phrase "my pen." I'm going to say this wrong. My pen rye.
Yeah.
Because it's something that either somebody says, you know, you hear it often in the course of the novel, and I don't know if is it something that is it a phrase that is sort of misunderstood, because it's like, oh, you know, Thai people are happy, and like it's what does it mean, and really, and what does it mean to you in the sort of context of the book?
I think that's such a great question. There's so many little things, but all right, Mai Ben Rai is something that you hear constantly in Thailand. You'll just hear it from everybody all the time. If somebody says, oh, I'm so sorry, I'm late, Mai Ben Rai, don't worry about it. You know, never mind, not a problem. And I think that it has a deeper meaning, and it reflects something very big about Thai culture. But part of the truth about this book and about me, and I think about most expats, is we don't have any idea what the true culture is and what the true meaning is and how it weaves through the people. You know, and so this family, the Prestons, abstracted things. All expatriates, I think, do that. They abstract things because you encounter them so much. So there are a lot of things that you say that you hear all the time, and you say, and you think you sort of understand what they mean because you've heard them in context. So there's an expatriate version of Mai Ben Rai that everybody who's lived in Bangkok or been to Bangkok understands. But I'm not sure that we're getting the whole kind of meaning because we're not Thai. And I think the Thai, they seem to be so understanding about that. Like they're such a, from what I know and from what I've seen and remember and all the reading that I've done, I don't think they particularly mind that we're all so stupid. But anyway, so Mai Ben Rai it just means, you know, don't worry about it. Don't let it bother you. Don't, you know, never mind.
Okay. But it could mean, but it sort of seems to be deeper than that somehow.
Well, I think it reflects something deeper about an attitude. You know, someone in the book says, you know, the Thai, they're all sanok, you know, which is, you know, fun, pleasure, like everyone just relax, have a good time. But that's probably the interface that you see, and it's probably really a true thing about the culture. But I think it's a mistake to try to encapsulate any culture, and I think a lot of people do that. They go to other countries and they say, oh, the Thai are this, or the Indian are this, and Americans are this. And I think it never is complex enough. There's never one true way to sum up anybody. But I do think there's a loveliness to interacting with the Thai, where they do want harmony. That's the culture. They seem to, and it's very important in business, not to disagree, not to tell anybody no. It's very rude and it's unpleasant. So it's confusing for Americans, and the people, I mean, the American women who are trying to figure out how to live in Bangkok are totally confused by the Thai. I thought that was fun to write, that part.
I love that sort of the tension between the expat women and Robert and his colleagues, and they're trying to assimilate, but also making these kind of, I don't know, just sort of generalizations about the people that they're living
right
to.
It's
and
racist and horrible.
Well, yeah.
I mean, it is racist and horrible, and it's a product of the time. And I'm not excusing them, but that is, we are so much more, I don't think we know more, but I think we're more aware that we don't know so much. So.
Definitely, I felt there was that tension too between, as a modern reader, reading about Genevieve and her sort of colleagues, peers in the 1960s Thailand, and how do you excuse that behavior, and then knowing where things lead and all of that. It was definitely.
I mean, how do we excuse how women have been treated until
right?
I don't know, a minute ago,
right? Still are, yeah.
It's all horrible. So I mean, everything is a mixed bag. There's nothing. That is actually one thing about this book that I think it succeeded in, that it really does have some deep or grim features. There are grim passages and grimnesses, but I do hope that the reader doesn't feel sadder after reading it. I think my purpose and my almost entire goal in life is to make you cry, but really to make you feel something so much that you would be moved in some way. And then when you're finished with the book, it doesn't make you feel worse about the world, because I think we have enough things to make us feel bad. So.
Yeah, I mean, and it's also a beautiful book. As I said before, I'm going to read it again, because it was such a pleasure to read.
I've read it many times.
Do you have
a
feeling of I mean, I always, when something isn't, it's sort of like finished form, you pick it up and you sort of have that, I wrote this disbelief, right. And then when you open it up, you're like, I did. I remember this.
There's a little bit of that, but because I'm such a ridiculous reviser, I've revised everything. I mean, just an insane amount. And so there are places where I'm like, oh, that's really nice. I finally got that. There are places where I get surprised. But I believe that I would still be revising if they hadn't forced me to stop. Because I always think that you can make it just a little bit more beautiful, or more you can, I don't know, stupid. I have a list on my phone. I got the book. I took my book out of the carton. I sent the first one to my godmother. I signed it and sent it to her. And the second one was mine. And I sat down and I have a list on my phone of all the little things I will tweak, all the word and the comma and the punctuation. Not that they're mistakes. It's just,
No, you're never really finished. And
right.
Yeah. No, I hear you.
So
I don't think when your book is in the final pages and you're just supposed to be, looking for little typos and things, that's when everybody, I think, starts hating me, because I'm like, can I just add paragraph here and take this away and put this word in because I need this out. I
Oh
need
my God.
this word in here, and yeah.
Yeah, I owe so much to my copy editors. I love them. Copy editing is so hard. I don't know how they do it. And I'm a very, very perfectionist person and very picky. And I think my copy is so perfect. And then it comes back to me and they're so politely pointing out these hideous, horrible mistakes. And I just think, and they don't know anything about the story. They have to learn about all the culture and there's so many things they're copy editing. It's so many layers. So I'm so grateful for my copy editor because I would have a lot more to fix. I mean, I'd be deeply ashamed if I didn't have that copy editor.
So we did have another question. For both of you, do you have a favorite book that you've written?
Oh. It's funny. I'm going to say Cobble Hill is my favorite book, but also the first Gossip Girl book because it's so kind of slight. It's not very long. It's not even 200 pages long. And I didn't know what I was doing. When I wrote that book. I've never written a book before. And I was really just like, I just wrote a book that I had never read before. And I thought, no one's going to read this, but at least I had a good time. And
That's cool.
I don't
Little
know,
did you know.
like this like very kind of small little treasure to me somehow. And it's always fun to pick it up and look at it again and read from it. So,
do you see things in there that you would change then again?
well, there's a Palm Pilot in the first Girl book. Does anybody use Palm Pilots anymore? I don't think so. Yeah, I mean, I have the same problem. I don't know if it's a problem, but like if somebody said like, here's Gossip Girl and you can revise it, like, and then I probably would. But then it shouldn't be, that shouldn't happen because it's like that it should stay, what it was then. I mean, I couldn't have written that book now, but I also couldn't have written Cobble Hill then. So I wouldn't want to sort of interfere with my, how old was I when I read that book? I guess almost like just turning 30 self. Like I'm going to keep her the way she was.
Right. And Lisa, is what could be saved your favorite book, or is it your favorite book because it's the one that's most recent? I've heard authors say that.
I really love this book, The
Yeah.
Possible World. I'm so proud of it, and I don't think I would change one comma in this book, which I worked this so hard, so long, and it went through so many little proofs and revisions. And I really do love this book very, very much, The Possible World. But I do feel like The Possible World, one of the characters is a doctor, and I really didn't ever want to write medicine or write about medicine. And I'm glad I did. I'm glad my character, she just forced herself to be a doctor. I tried to make her all kinds of other things, and she just kept working her way back to being a doctor. And I feel like I did a little bit of almost an exorcism or catharsis to try to convey medicine. The experience of practicing medicine is just really, really hard. It's so much. It's just like anything, trying to write anything that's difficult, any job that anybody does, almost any job has so much complexity to it. And if you try to tell all of it, it's just drudgery and stupid and it doesn't have any impact. So it was a real test to try to give you the right idea with such a small amount. Like people kept saying, oh my God, she worked so hard. That was it was so busy. And I'm thinking, you have no idea. My God, like I tell you about 3 patients. Holy crap. I mean, but if you try to say it all, you become numb. So I really was happy with the way that came out. And I love that book. I really do. But this one I'm excited about because it's more it's if anything, more ambitious. I don't know. It goes really deep into my heart. It's because of my childhood and Bangkok, and I feel like I did some aspects of being expatriate justice, and also my generation justice. You know, that time of being young and just, you know, unsupervised, and now you know, teetering on the brink of crondom, and not and still have it. You know, these characters have personalities and lives, and they still have things they can change, and their world can be different. They're not settled into a spot where they're just sort of waiting to die. So I'm very fond of this book, but the next one will be better.
Are you working on something now, or what's next?
Yes, you stole my question. That was always something I always want to know.
I was working on a book. I was pretty far into it before the pandemic hit, and then the pandemic really, it's a book that's different from these other two in that it's set in the near future. I've done a lot of past books that have these like sagas, these long, and a lot of historical, a lot of steeping myself in history to get the details right. And while I love that, I just love it, it's a long process, and you're always worried that someone's going to come out of the woodwork, you know, and say, you got that wrong. And so I really wanted to write something speculative. And so the next book that I'm planning is, or partway through, is set in the near future, but because of COVID, I'm having a hard time putting myself into that world just yet, because I'm trying to understand what will remain, what will have changed forever, what will come back, what will never come back. And I also don't want COVID to be an active thing in the book. I need to look beyond it, I think, in order to like stay sane in this situation. So anyway, that's I do find it interesting. I look forward to the day when we can reflect back on, you know, our recovery from COVID. But anyway, so that's the plan, is to write something that's in the near future, not quite science fiction, but there's an element of advanced technology, because I like technology a lot. So that's in the book. And Cecily, are you writing anything?
I'm not writing a book. Because I wasn't involved in the writing of the Gossip Girl TV show, and there was interest in Cobble Hill possibly for TV. I have been working on sort of adapting it. And I don't even know if this is something that like is really going to happen, that I'll be writing Cobble Hill, the TV show, but it's been an interesting exercise. And I'm not actually a huge TV watcher. And I'm not even a big social media person, anything. I'm kind of like I'm not a Luddite, but I read a lot, and I'm kind of a quiet person anyway. So I've been watching more television and like paying attention to the writing and reading scripts as well. And that's always interesting to read sort of a script and a book in parallel is really kind of an interesting thing to do.
It is. Writing for TV is a whole different kind of writing that's
so different.
Beautiful. Storytelling, it's still storytelling. And yeah. I would argue that some of the best storytelling happening right now is on the small screen. Yeah. Just, you know, unbelievable storytelling, but it's so different. You know, the things you can do with the medium of television or with video, you know, it's just, you can show something in 3 seconds that will, you know, take a page and a half to approximate.
Right.
So yeah, anyway, I think that's really cool.
Yeah, I mean, it's different, but it's a fun challenge too. So, so I'm actually like, I said I would know, because I always yelled at my kids for like watching TV on their phones, because I was like, how can you do that? You're ruining your eyes. And now I'm doing it. Like, like in bed, like,
Have your kids watched Gossip Girl?
Yeah, they actually, they were kind of watching it at too young of an age. They were watching it when it was on TV, like the, because I was asked to tweet at that time. I was using Twitter, live during the episodes. And so, one of the things I remember was my son, who was like, in elementary school at the time, like falling asleep because he'd been up too late watching Gossip Girl with all of us. And I'm so worried about Chuck. And like, he was like, I don't know, 6. Because I think, this was like an episode where like Chuck Bass is on the roof drunk and he's like threatening to jump because Blair has broken up with him or something. But it was completely inappropriate that I was allowing my children to. So that there's some of their earliest memories are watching Gossip Girl. But yeah. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with Cobble Hill. I'm keeping my fingers crossed.
Well, it's good to know that both of you are working on creating content and works and stories for us in some form or another. As I said at the beginning, I've read both of your books, and they're both just such treasures. Our staff, they both have been staff picks actually in the store, both in November and now in January. So unless, I don't know if there are any other questions from the audience, but I did want to, if I know there are some friends on here of the authors too, if you wanted to, I'll unspotlight the authors here. If you wanted to turn on a video and give us a little wave. It sounds like there's some college friends and some other things. So
hi, Mimi.
Please feel free to do that. But I want to thank
my college roommate. Sorry.
So sweet for everyone's support. We appreciate that. I know the others do too. But I want to thank everybody for being with us this evening to talk about some great stories, which is what we need, which is going to get us through however long this all goes, right? And sometimes keep us from watching the news or feeling whatever emotions we're feeling because of whatever events that have been happening. But it's been really great to have you all with us, and to our authors for sharing your time and your work with us. Thank you so much. It is just so appreciated. For those of you who did order a copy of the book, those are going to be available very soon in our neighborhood store or start shipping out to you if that is the option that you chose. So stay tuned. You'll get an email from me via Event Combo when they are ready for that, and so that you can start enjoying them right away. So unless Liese and Cecily, do you guys have anything else? Any other ending words for us?
I just want to say thank you so much to both Andersons and Ginny specifically for fielding my stupid questions before the event, and and thank you very much to Cecily. I know that, yes, I mean, it's really above and beyond the call of duty that she's just like in a hotel room and I'm gonna figure this out. What I loved about Cecily, our conversation before this, because Cecily and I don't know each other, we just met, and you just made me feel so much relaxed about this, because you said we don't have to be orderly as much as entertaining. And that just, I mean, that is now going to be my new motto, my new personal motto. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it should be everyone's motto. Maybe, I don't know. No, not everyone. But anyway, thank you so much, Ginny, and thank you to everyone here.
Yes, well, congratulations to you both on your newest books, and we really appreciate it. And to everyone else, thank you. Be safe and happy reading.
Thank you.
Have a great evening, everyone. Thank you so much.
Bye, Mimi. Bye, Maura.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.